Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Catalog and Cocktails. It's Wednesday once again. Wanted to say, remember, this is a live hangout, an honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about data with a tasty beverage in our hand. I'm Tim Gasper, Director of Product over at data.world.
And I'm Juan Sequeda, the Principal Scientist here at data.world. How are you doing, Tim? How's your Wednesday?
Good.
How's your mid of your week?
It is going awesomely. You know, it's been another really busy week, but you know, I feel like Catalog and Cocktails is perfectly timed week-wise, where you know you get to the end of day on Wednesday and you're just kind of a little exhausted, and you're like, hey, it's time for a rum and Coke or whatever it is that you've got going on. Right today, I'm playing it simple today.
You're playing.
What are you drinking? Drinking? Juan?
I'm just gonna have a little bit of Lefroy 10. This is my favorite peated Scotch. It's been kind of like a rainy day here in Austin, even though it just got humid. I wish it were cooler, but oh well. So I want to quickly remind everybody about a really cool thing that we're doing at data.world. We are on September 23rd, we are going to host our first Data.world Summit. It's going to be a half-day event of new ideas, practical guidance, and just journeys into the latest innovations in data practices and technology and leadership. We have a great lineup of speakers. Right now we can announce we have DJ Patel, I think the world's actually first data scientist and the US as first data scientist. So we're really excited about that. We'll put the link in the chat and we'll be tweeting about that. So September 23rd. Mark that on your calendar. Hope to see you all there.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this event. And for those who are listening, it is data.world/events/summit. So please join us on September 23rd. It should be fun. And yeah, we've got a bunch of good speakers set up for that. I'm always excited and you know, sometimes surprised about, you know, given that we're not doing just sort of the enterprise side of things, but we have this really large open data community as well that we're connected to a lot of really interesting people in the data world. So it's kind of cool. We actually had a great conversation last week with some really, really smart people in data. That was a good one.
Yeah. So we've over the last months, we've been talking about so many different topics on knowledge graphs and agile data governance, different personas, catalogs, lakes, data lineage, data quality, data policy, and so forth. And one of the things that we've been discussing a lot internally within our engineering team, with our UX team, with our customers, with our friends, with our colleagues and everything is AI, right? AI, this balance of AI and how does it work inside the enterprise? And we've just been kind of thinking so much about this stuff and we wanted to have a session about AI on Catalog and Cocktails, but there's a lot to talk about. So we kind of want to go split this up in two parts. And I think the first topic that we want to go touch today, kind of on the path to AI here, is this notion that we've been kind of throwing around about crowdsourcing. And I think that's going to be our topic today, Tim. So I'm really excited to go kind of dive into this notion of crowdsourcing because next week we're going to be talking about more machine learning and more of the AI features. But yeah, let's go talk about crowdsourcing.
We'll get a little bit more of the sort of the intelligence of the masses today, and then we'll talk about the intelligence of the robots next week. But yeah, no, I'm actually surprised that it took us this long to really dive into AI. You know, I think there were many opportunities where we could have been a little weak and just relented and talked about it sooner. So actually, I'm proud of how strong we've been.
So but before we get into like AI and crowdsourcing, all these things, is let's boil up things again and let's think about it kind of at a high level and say, what are the types of just tasks that as people in the enterprise that we have to go do things with their data? What are those tasks that we have to go through that our goal is to make these tasks easier, more enjoyable, right? Less painful and so forth. And then I think the hypothesis is that we want to be able to go automate everything and we want to be able to go have AI that does all this magic stuff for us. But before we get there is what are those, let's chat a little bit about those tasks that we see that we need to go really kind of, that we want to go improve upon.
Yeah,
So
that's that's a really good idea, Juan, because I think it's easy to talk about just the technology, but it's best to start from the use cases. So I know that one of the first ones that we were talking about, we were just brainstorming a little bit, is obviously around sort of the search and discovery experience, right? This is more sort of automation in service to, to some degree, the people who are documenting and curating your data, but especially the consumers who can benefit from that, right? Things like tagging, things like related data sets, things like related concepts like your glossary, or if you're starting to build up your knowledge graph, maybe it's some of your semantic concepts. That's obviously a major area of potential automation and sort of improvement.
So I think, so what we're saying, search and discovery, and then we have this notion that people don't like to document, right? And I think this is why we end up kind of going through these, we lose all this information, all this knowledge that people have in their heads because they don't document things, right? So I think that's one of the other aspects that we see is like, what is the context about this data? So how is this data going to be used, and in what ways can it be used? What are the policies behind this data, right? We gotta be able to go annotate these are the aspects of the data we have to go figure out, and it's painful to go do this, but we need to be able to do this. I think that
Yep.
documentation is another one. What else?
We hear that one a lot, and I think another one is around, and I think this one's a little bit more difficult, but we get asked about it, and there's some, advanced thinking in this area is around how do we use sort of AI and automation to assist with things like data access or data workflow. And so this is thinking about things more like, the joins and sort of the access to the data itself, or how you might combine that data together. Permissions, such as, what data do you have permission to, or, the ability to sort of automate the requesting of permission. So this is sort of, around not just policy, but sort of the application and the enforcement of policy.
Yeah, no, and I think this is a big desire that people want is, okay, I have these two data sets, two at least, right? How do I put them together? What are the keys I want to go join on this stuff, right? And what is the correct way of doing this? And then even when you get into the permissions, like you can go into like, can I access these particular columns? Can I access all the rows, or what set of the rows can I access? And identifying what those permissions are, identifying or annotating what those join keys are, right? That's something that we need to go do. We want to how can we make our lives easier on that side? And I think going into a little bit more of the data, and we've talked about this, we've had a session on Catalog and Cocktails on this topic of data quality, right? That is something that we hope to be able to know, hey, this data set has issues, right? And these issues are, there are a bunch of null values in there, or there's too many discrepancies, or there's so many things that we want to be able to go identify. And even, there's emails in this thing, right? And those emails are wrong, or things like that, right? So I think those are the types of kind of other features that we want to be able to have to help make our life easier.
Yep, I think those are all great examples, and there's a ton of other use cases as well, but I think these are especially the ones, search, documentation, access, workflow, quality. These are ones that we hear, I think, very often about, like, hey, how can we bring some automation to this, right? But usually the request for those things is because of something someone's heard, or we all see how AI is starting to come to play in every market, in every sort of area of software. We get excited about the application of that. So I think that kind of brings us to the next topic, which is, what are the expectations there, and how realistic are they?
So I'll put my scientific hat on for a second, and I think about the problem kind of from one spectrum to the other, right? Let's go frame all the possible solutions here. On one side of the spectrum, it's like, okay, we're going to manually do everything, right? We're going to manually annotate every single column, every single thing, right? And we're going to have a big governance session to understand what is correct or not. That's one side of the spectrum, which we obviously do not want to go do. The other side of the spectrum is, let's assume that we have the magic wand and the general AI and Skynet is here, whatever, and we can have machines that can just automatically do everything for us. And for some reason, it's going to work and we trust it, right? Well, those are those two spectrums. none of them are real. None of them are actually going to happen. So we need to go find somewhere on the spectrum where we are, right? And I think that's a lot of the hype. A lot of the, if you're going more towards the general AI, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the hype. When you're going to the most of the on the other side where it's a lot of very manual, this is the stuff that people do not want. They expect some more automation here. So what is that balance? And I think that's what keeps us all up at night at some point. And this is the type of stuff that we're trying to figure out. What is that balance, and what is the messaging, and what is reality versus the hype?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point. And I love that example of the spectrum there. And I think that, the goal in the end is to try to scale up what we can do as humans, right? I think we look at things like AI and automation as a way to, whether it's searching for data or it's you're more of a steward or a data owner and you're kind of documenting your data, you want to try to make your efforts go further, to go longer, and to be more repeatable, right? If I document a column once, like I don't want to repeat documenting that column 10 times. Like I want that one time I documented it to go a long way, and I want it to learn something ideally, right? But that goal of automation, of scaling, it gets sort of the thing that weighs against it is accuracy, right? Like, is it doing it well? Is it doing it right? Right. And what you don't want to do. Yeah.
Sorry,
and for
whom, and for what context, and for what use case? Because there isn't really just one way, one correct measure. And I think I remember in a previous discussion with some folks afterwards, we were talking about data quality. It depends on it's on the eye of the beholder, right? It depends on who's accessing the data, who's using it. So that's something we need to take into account too. That's why, as you mentioned, humans need to play a key role here.
Yep. Because that's who we're scaling, right? We're not trying to replace people. We're trying to let, you're onboarding more data. You're creating dashboards faster than you ever have before. You're just trying to figure out how the exponential growth of data can result in a governance team that doesn't have to also exponentially grow, right?
So I think, and the other question I get when people start talking about, can you automate this? And I say, okay, imagine that you have that magic wand and the AI automates things. Now, first of all, are you going to accept everything that the AI system says? I hope not. First of all, I hope not. You have to be skeptical about things. You have to go look at it. But still, even if they do, are you just going to accept everything that has an accuracy above 90%? Maybe that's your policy and you're gonna be fine with that. Maybe that system works, but for some sort of use cases, but not for some others. So how do we manage that right there? And I think even though we can have systems that can help us go scale to large amounts of data, go do any of these things that we discussed before, we still want to be able to have a way that the human comes in and says, this looks good, this does not look good, I authorize this, I don't authorize this, or we need more feedback and stuff like that. And I think that's the crux of the situation, is how do we scale that for humans? I love what you just said, is it's not about just the data. We got to go scale for all this data that is coming in, but we're going to get more data. Does that mean we need more people? No, we're not going to get more people. So how do we scale humans? I think that is what we need to be able to go figure out. And people forget that humans must be involved too.
Yep, 100%, Juan. And I think that there's this concept that I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's that it's first of all what you're saying, right? It's humans are in the loop, right? And it's humans and machines working together. And I think, the smart companies that are doing really good things with AI and aren't sort of like the sort of the examples of many companies that are sort of fizzling out in this space right now, is that they're thinking about the relationship between machines and humans. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that I feel like it's not just about humans and machines, because I think that when you look at cataloging or understanding your data, it's a little bit asymmetrical in the sense that there are subject matter experts, there are experts, and there are people who are accountable in your organization, and they have a different level of expertise that they're bringing to the equation than the masses. Now, in the same token, the masses are also important because they're the ones who know the things that you don't know, right? The things that you know, the things that you don't know, and the things that you don't know, all that kind of stuff, right? And so I really think it's important to look at two aspects of humans. One is, the experts in your company, And the other is, how do we actually get more people involved in the conversation and have them contribute? And so I kind of see it almost like a triangle, right? You've got sort of your experts, you have crowdsourcing, which I know is more explicitly what we're talking about today, and then you have the role of AI and automation. And these three things are all working together and engaging each other to help make, I kind of think of it as collective intelligence. This is the collective intelligence that you're building in your organization around your data and around your insights.
Huh. I actually hadn't thought about it that way. And I think you go into more details here, because I was thinking, first of all, it is human machines. And if you look, there's this whole area called human in the loop. And this is a big research area in computer science about human in the loop. And I always ask myself, is it just human in the loop? Why isn't it machine in the loop, right? I think there should be a balance there. And I think you want to be able to the human wants to understand, once they understand kind of the process, they say, okay, this is something I can go automate. I pass it on to a system, go automate it, and I will go in and authorize it just because you've done all the work for me. I just have to go to do a quick check.
Yep.
But what I see, what you're saying is that human, actually, there's different personas for that human. It's not just one persona. There can be multiple personas. And at least the two buckets that you're saying is there's going to be kind of more the call it an expert, let it be, I don't know, somebody who really knows the domain, a domain expert, subject matter expert, or it could be even the data steward who's the one in charge. But then there's a bunch of other people who have something to say about this. And that's the masses, that's the crowd. And so we see these two kind of different buckets of humans, and then we have the machines. Did I summarize what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think that's a great way to summarize it. And obviously, the masses, the crowdsourcing are a really important piece of that. And I think, just to zoom in on that piece a little bit, crowdsourcing is often an element that is underemphasized. And I actually saw a question here posted by somebody in the chat. They said, are we trying to scale humans, or are we trying to scale human experts? I think the answer is both. And the thing that's excluded with experts is like the masses, right? And that's where, you've got all these people who are building dashboards using your data. You got them trying to understand how these terms are used in your business. Their thoughts matter, and they can help you scale, how you approach these problems as well. Just like, look at things like Kickstarter and all these different things and how they've been able to bring crowdsourcing into the mix. So I think crowdsourcing is a huge factor here.
So we've been throwing this word crowdsourcing, and it's always kind of weird when you start using this term and we don't define it. So
yeah, it's like, well, what does it even mean, right?
What does it even mean? Well, I actually took quick notes here, and so I'm going to read out what Wikipedia has to say, even though we got to be skeptical of Wikipedia definitions. But a crowdsourcing is a sourcing model in which individuals or organizations obtain goods and services, including ideas, voting, microtasks, and finance, from a large and relatively open and often rapidly evolving group of participants. So with that definition in mind, how do we apply crowdsourcing to enterprise data management?
Yeah, that's a good question, because obviously that definition is pretty broad. And so, I kind of think of there being three main areas where crowdsourcing applies well to the sort of the catalog realm, or, data management realm. It's first of all, sort of this aspect of inclusion and training and enablement, right? Like, if you don't include everyone and get them involved in the conversation and in the sort of the process, you're not leveling up as an organization. And I think we've had a theme come up several times now in our catalog and cocktail sessions, where we are trying to increase the literacy of our company so that we can do more, so that we can be more data driven, so that we can contribute more. So that's sort of the first thing. The second thing is getting folks to help with the work, right? And so this is sort of the social involvement, the crowdsourcing of content at scale, right? If people are helping tagging, if people are helping explaining how they use things, then that information can scale a person in some ways, for certain use cases, for certain metadata, way better than a machine can, right? It's just going to have more context and more nuance. And it's going to, the more people emphasize and push something, the more that you can tell that that's a good thing. Which leads into the third thing, which is measuring, right? When the crowd is involved, you can look at things like usage, like popularity, like, what are people querying the most? Are people saying that something isn't to be trusted, right? That something, they're saying that this data set is no good for whatever reason. If the data steward says, hey, you should trust this data set, but one person says, no, I don't trust it, maybe you're like, okay, maybe this isn't too bad. But if 25 people are saying they don't trust it, whew, we've got a problem here.
So let's kind of go through some examples of what crowdsourcing would look like in an ideal data management platform and a data catalog, right? So first thing that comes to mind is reviews, right? I mean, we do this
Right.
through all e-commerce. We've been doing this for so long, and actually, cool thing is that one of the CEO of data.world is Brett Hurt, and he was a founder of Bizarre Voice, who kind of brought the category of reviews to websites, right? So here we go. So we got reviews, and we can do this for data sets and stuff. So that's kind of a first type of crowdsource. And even like your stars, right? Even if you're not going to actually write a review, you can put stars. And if the majority of the people are writing the stars, then what does that actually mean, right? It's a popular one. People like it, but is that the right one to go do? Like, is it the context? So it kind of takes you to one level, but there's more that can be done, right?
Yeah, that's definitely sort of the traditional view, is like, oh, let's put, likes and stars on things, because, if it works for buying a computer on bestbuy.com, then it must work for shopping for data, right? And I think that there are places for that, right? And that's an obvious, like, potential low-hanging fruit, but that also can potentially lead you down the wrong path, right? I think that reviews can be noisy, and oftentimes data is pretty dynamic, and so a data set gets updated, right? And sometimes you go to you go shopping online or something like that, and you see something and you're like, oh wow, like this got like a 1-star review, but then you see that review is from 2017 or something like that, right? So sometimes that context is there and sometimes it's not. It can be a little difficult sometimes to navigate.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? If I got a bunch of 1-star reviews but they're old and the problem got solved, like, does that get updated, right? So I guess reviews is one first way of doing it. But if we look at, for example, and I've always been inspired, like Google Docs has really inspired the way how we do things. And I think in before, when we were working on our Grapho, right, our visual modeling tool, we're highly inspired by Google Docs. One of the things we like about Google Docs is like their suggestions. We want to be able to go and you own a document, but you can share a document with somebody else. So other people, they're not going to go edit the document. They're going to add suggestions, and you as the owner accept those suggestions or not. So I think that's something that I've always liked about Google Docs. And then if we made this analogy with software engineering before, and we have like GitHub and people do pull requests and stuff. And pull request is that, like, I'm going to do this change. I want somebody else to approve it, and it's going to go in. So that's in the way you're crowdsourcing the entire project between different people. What I wanted to one of the things that we were talking about with Tim before was this idea about suggestions. And this is something, the topic I was bringing up about like Google Docs. And when you think about it, so you have, for example, a data set, and people will be an owner of a data set, the data steward and stuff. And you'll ask, other people have something to say about that data set, and they can make comments about it, but there are probably particular changes. Like somebody else who will say, oh, we need to go add these particular tags to this data set because I know a part of this data set that you may not know. I want to make those suggestions. And we want to be able to have a way to accept those suggestions or reject the suggestions and give reasons. So you want to be able to have kind of this back and forth between kind of the data stewards and also the rest of the data users within the organization. And you can see this with so much other aspects. I mean, I just gave an idea of like tags, but you want to be able to add more metadata fields, for example. So will probably have a defined profile about metadata fields for data sets, but there's more things that should be added. And why should the work of defining one the one single profile be handled by just a small group of folks. Ideally, you want to be able to start off with something, but everything can change. And again, if we go back to that definition of the crowd, right, we're talking about it's an open and often rapidly evolving group of participants. And I think that stuff is going to change. And then the temporal aspect, right? At some point, the data set looks good, but at another point, things may change and we want to be able to go update that. And we can't expect that your core group of stewards are always going to be managing things and can be on top of everything. So I think we need to really think about how we can give power to the rest of our colleagues within an organization, but do it in a way that we can manage it and be kind of respectful of the different policies are in place, the workflows that we need to have. So that's the balance that I think that we need to be able to go figure out. And I think the end result of having this crowdsource approach within the organization is you're encouraging participation from your entire organization. And I think that's the true meaning of data democratization. If I want to democratize data, it's not just to give people access to the data. We want to have this feedback loop. I want the user to go access the data, look at it, and they provide feedback. And that feedback is we got to take it to the next level. It's not just about sending you a comment somewhere or sending you a Slack message or an email where all this information gets passed. It's like you really want to take that feedback and almost elevate that as a first-class citizen. And you start encouraging participation. And when people can actually start using the data and then they can go back and start contributing, I think everybody feels more empowered and they want to be able to go do more with the data. And then we talk about data literacy. I think these are all aspects of how we can improve participation, improve contribution and literacy. And another aspect I was thinking about chatting with Tim here, I don't know if Tim's back or not, is the whole aspect of making documentation actually fun. But so I was just wrapping up here with a couple of things we're talking about. Kind of what is the result when you start crowdsourcing is that you encourage participation, you really kind of improve literacy because people who are consuming the data, they can actually give back. And the other thing is, and I think we take this too lightly, but it's super important, it's documentation. And we hate documenting things. But if you look again in the software world, it's become part of our habit, and we do things because we're agile, right? So we don't go write a waterfall, we end up writing all the documentation at the end. We want to be able to have this agile approach. And the thing is that you can now crowdsource also your documentation because you can say, why did we make this change? Well, you can see all the other people who suggested that change, and that power of the crowd helps us make our data smarter, right? It gives us more explanation about our data. So I always like to wrap up with kind of our takeaway, and I always write our takeaway kind of during this process, but I don't know, Tim, let me go throw it to you now that you're back. Final words here about crowdsourcing.
Absolutely. So I think that, our final takeaway here is that, crowdsourcing can be a huge game changer in your data management realm. And if you can include folks from across your company, pair them up with the experts and with the automation, which we'll talk about in the next episode, then you can really get them to do a lot of the work, participate in a lot of the work. You can measure what they're doing. And it just creates this flywheel where you're kind of getting participation and improving the participation of everyone. And I think that's the goal and the promise of crowdsourcing. And we think it's pretty important.
So I think my quick sentence is crowdsourcing and data management. We want to include everyone in an organization. We want to give them some work. We want to let them have some fun, and we want to go measure that. And that it's going to help us improve the quality and the usage of our data. And everybody becomes a data person. With that, Tim, thank you so much. Always enjoy these conversations. We had a small glitch. We'll figure it out next time.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. You have a great one, Tim.